Wherever you're watching, welcome to AWA Updates, where we bring you the biggest developments shaping our world today. And in this report, we're diving deep into Donald Trump's second term and how, just 6 months in, his presidency is already reshaping the entire U.S. economy with implications that stretch across the globe. From sweeping tax reforms and aggressive trade policies to bold moves in the energy and mining sectors that have economists debating the long-term costs and benefits. And before we go deeper, make sure you subscribe to AWA Updates so you never miss our deep dive analyses into world affairs, politics, and the economy. President Trump, returning to the White House in January for his second term, wasted no time launching a new economic doctrine that centers on 3 core principles: manufacturing dominance, economic self-reliance, and an America-first approach to trade. His message to global business leaders is clear and uncompromising. Either manufacture in the United States and enjoy some of the lowest corporate tax rates in the world, or manufacture abroad and pay steep tariffs at the border. These tariffs, he promises, will funnel trillions into the U.S. Treasury and serve a dual purpose: funding domestic programs and reducing the staggering national debt. But while this strategy may sound financially sound on the surface, it's already sparking ripples of uncertainty across key industries. Since January, we've witnessed a cascade of policy shifts, including substantial tax cuts aimed at incentivizing investment, major spending initiatives across infrastructure and defense, and stringent immigration controls that are shrinking the American labor supply, all wrapped in the administration's overarching philosophy of protecting American jobs and reviving domestic industry, despite inheriting an economy that had been expanding for 3 consecutive years. Trump's aggressive measures come at a time when the U.S. is facing complex challenges, most notably stubbornly high inflation and a ballooning trade deficit that reached $1.2 trillion last year, with China, Mexico, and Vietnam accounting for the largest portions. These deficits have become a key target of Trump's tariff strategy, but critics argue that such unpredictable shifts in policy are making it nearly impossible for American businesses to plan ahead. One toy store owner illustrated this point by revealing that, due to constantly fluctuating import costs, his company won't be printing prices in their catalogs at all this year. A fundamental shift in how they operate. Builders are stockpiling lumber on empty lots, and steel manufacturers are hoarding material in anticipation of unpredictable price hikes, underscoring the fear-driven behavior spreading through American industry. The administration's evolving trade policies are contributing to rising inflation, something the Federal Reserve has been struggling to control. Interest rates remain pinned between 4.25% and 4.5%. High by historical standards, but President Trump continues to lambast Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, whom he criticizes for not cutting rates quickly enough. He claims Powell is 3 points behind where rates should be and accuses the Fed of making it harder for Americans to afford homes and loans. While the Federal Reserve is technically independent, Trump's public criticisms are part of a broader attempt to steer monetary policy toward his economic agenda, even if that means undermining the Fed's credibility. At the same time, one of Trump's most contentious moves has been his stance on immigration. While often framed as a national security issue, the economic impact is becoming clearer. With fewer migrant workers entering the U.S., the labor force is shrinking. Economist Adam Posen of the Peterson Institute for International Economics argues that these policies could result in inflationary pressures and even a potential recession, as a lack of available workers hampers productivity and economic expansion. According to Posen, the administration's approach is based on fundamental misunderstandings about trade and economics, including the mistaken belief that bilateral trade deficits matter and that reviving old manufacturing industries will secure America's future, views he considers economically obsolete. He warns that while Trump's policies may satisfy political goals or respond to public frustration, they ultimately impose significant long-term costs that outweigh their short-term appeal. For example, using tariffs as a blunt tool for foreign policy may seem effective in theory, but in practice it risks inflaming inflation, damaging global supply chains, and harming consumer purchasing power. Meanwhile, the administration continues to champion tariffs as a way to achieve not just economic leverage, but geopolitical security, especially in industries vital to national defense. Nowhere is this clearer than in the metals and mining sector, where tariffs on copper, steel, and aluminum are being used to push for increased domestic production. Trump argues that America can no longer depend on foreign sources for essential materials, and that national security demands local supply chains. To explore this further, we turn to Robert Friedland, a billionaire mining magnate behind Ivanhoe Mines and Ivanhoe Electric, whose companies are building one of the first major new copper mines in the U.S. in over 2 decades. According to Friedland, copper is the king of all metals and critical for everything from electric vehicles and clean energy to telecommunications and military hardware. He says that less than half the copper America is currently produced domestically, and this shortfall leaves the U.S. dangerously exposed in a rapidly fragmenting global economy. Friedland points out that while the 50% copper tariff may seem extreme, it has successfully directed capital toward rebuilding domestic mining operations. His Arizona project, located in a region historically rich in copper, is designed to be a green, state-of-the-art facility producing ultra-refined electronics-grade copper without the need for smelting, an innovation that reduces pollution and processing costs. He notes that the entire output of this mine will likely be consumed within Arizona itself by companies like Lucid Motors and Taiwan Semiconductor, which are building electric cars and semiconductors nearby. This level of vertical integration and localized supply is exactly what the Trump administration is aiming for, an industrial ecosystem where critical materials are mined, processed, and consumed within U.S. borders. But to achieve this vision at scale, Friedland says the government must go further by streamlining permitting processes, investing in big data mining technologies, and treating raw materials as critical national assets, just like China has done. He even quotes Chinese President Xi Jinping, who said the energy rice bowl must be held in our own hands, highlighting the geopolitical urgency that now shapes mining policy worldwide. Friedland asserts that this shift isn't just a Republican priority. Democrats, too, recognize the strategic importance of domestic mining, whether it's for green energy or national defense. He argues that under Trump, Washington has finally woken up to the realities of supply chains and the need to secure essential resources. Unlike previous administrations, which he says treated supply chains as abstract concepts, Trump's government is now looking at the real-world consequences of REL, being on foreign producers for the metals and materials that power modern life. In his view, Trump is unequivocally good for the U.S. economy, not because of traditional market theories, but because he forces a reevaluation of where and how economic value is created, especially in foundational sectors like mining, energy, and industrial production. As the world shifts toward electrification, AI, and next-generation infrastructure, demand for critical metals like copper is expected to skyrocket, and the United States, under Trump's policies, is positioning itself to meet that demand with homegrown resources. Still, economists warn that the road ahead remains uncertain. If tariffs drive up consumer prices too quickly, or if immigration policies choke labor markets, the economy could overheat or stall. Moreover, critics argue that Trump's tendency to change course abruptly, announcing new deadlines, adjusting tariffs, or revising trade rules on short notice, creates a volatile environment that undermines business confidence. But for Trump supporters, this very unpredictability is part of his strategy to keep adversaries off balance, to keep global corporations honest, and to reassert American power not just militarily, but economically. The central question remains, can this all-out high-pressure approach truly transform the U.S. economy for the better, or will it ultimately expose deeper vulnerabilities in America's political and economic systems? That answer may not come quickly, but what's clear is that the United States is entering a new economic era, one defined by assertiveness, industrial revival, and geopolitical self-reliance. Whether that gamble pays off will depend not just on policy execution, but on how adaptable businesses, workers, and global markets are to this aggressive reordering of economic rules. Thanks for staying with us through this in-depth analysis. See you in the next video.